For as long as I can remember, I've been different. I think differently, look at things differently, and question everything. And over the journey so far, this has pissed off more people than I care to imagine. At the time of writing these words, I'm 54 years of age and I've been on a constant journey of development and self-discovery since I was about 19. Hi, my name is Bruce Holcren and I'm the creator of this course. It's been created out of pure need and is presented as a gift to my fellow human beings. No outcome promises, just a course to maybe help you at this point in time in your journey, to enable you to get from where you are today to where it is you'd like to get to. Let me explain where I'm coming from and how this course has come about. I was fortunate enough to play basketball in Australia at the highest pro level for 8 years and also play semi-pro for the 3 years prior to and post this 8-year period. A 14-year period where the sport consumed me and my priorities. But it also changed me dramatically now that I think about it. But let's go back to my junior days and see where these personal challenges, thought processes, and my personal wall started to be developed. After all, these are called formative years for a reason. Before I begin this explanation, I want you to know that I very much love and appreciate the people who spent part of their life journey coaching me. For many, it was as a volunteer. For some, it was, and still is, a career choice. And please note, this isn't reflective of all my coaches, just a few that had a dramatic and long-term engagement or effect with me. When I started playing as a child in the early 1970s as an 8-year-old, there wasn't a reference point for any of this personal development stuff. It was typically tough love. Upon reflection, there was a very quick pattern that emerged, and that was this. I seemed to be an easy target for the coaches to attack. Whether it was my easygoing nature, maybe it appeared that I wasn't trying. This was never the case, but as a coach, I've since seen many athletes playing like they're cruising. And even though it looks like they're not trying, whenever they come to the bench, they've been working their butts off. And I strongly believe this is what people saw in me too, at all levels. There were specific incidents that burned these memories into my brain, and until recently, were a trauma that I had been dealing with. For example, one freezing winter morning in the middle of June in Australia, we were playing in a top-level tournament as under-16s. I was 14. It was an 8:30 a.m. game in a very, very cold stadium. As a team, we just didn't play well. Shots weren't dropping, but it wasn't for lack of trying, we just lost. At the end of the game, I was singled out as not trying hard enough because my legs were still blue, which means apparently I hadn't been running hard enough. Of course, not only did I have no control over this, I'd worked my butt off and was completely exhausted, and this was the feedback I got. There's a term in Australian sport called whipping boy, and it's set aside for the athlete that attracts negative attention from the coach, no matter who is to blame. That, it turned out, at many levels, was me. Other examples included international exhibition games as under 18s, we were 16, playing against men, and this resulted in me getting totally ripped by the coach both during the game, in multiple games, and during timeouts when the stadium was quiet. And I was the target of the full-on screaming, coaching attacks about everything that was going wrong out on the floor. Somehow I was expecting to stop a fully grown man who weighed 90 plus kilograms and was 198 centimeters, getting to the basket when I was about 182 centimeters and probably 70 kilos if I was lucky. I later found out that my parents were on the verge of coming down out of the stands on many occasions, and my dad was simply going to punch the coach in the face. Totally out of character for my dad, but his son was being verbally attacked and embarrassed. They also wondered how I put up with this constant barrage of abuse and focus over the years. I simply shrugged and said, I have no idea. Would I put up with it again? Of course not. But I didn't have a choice then. I wanted to play too much. In hindsight, I know I spent a lot of time trying to get my coach's approval. It meant everything to me. The last thing I wanted to do was to let them down. If the coach said go and practice using both hands or get better at this skill, I was going to be the very best at it. And as far as using my opposite hand, from the age of 15, no one really knew what my favourite or strongest hand was. Unless you saw me shoot, that was the only giveaway. But closer to the basket, either hand was as good as the other. I figured if I had no weaknesses, there wouldn't be a reason to yell at me. I'll show them. When I made the pros, it was like playing in another world, and I loved it. The first half of the season went very well, and I found my feet and grew. I played in a few key moments of the games, got better at every session, and was really starting to grow in confidence and feel like I belonged in the league. Bring it on. But then something happened about halfway through my rookie season. One of our key players said he was leaving and our coach lost his mind. As if something switched overnight, it started. Someone had to bear the brunt of the frustration of the coach, and it turned out to be me, the rookie. If anything went wrong on the court at practice, apparently it was my fault. If I missed a shot, someone scored, or missed a rebound, I was running lines or just being yelled at. It got to the point where one incident happened at practice, the coach started yelling out my name and berating me, then realised I wasn't on the court, and so he just stopped yelling. The senior guys kept telling me to ignore it, but I'm not wired that way. It affected me greatly. And this pattern happened year after year. I'd go away and train my butt off over the off season, run, lift weights, do a lot of things that I thought would make me better, but as I look back, I was searching for a way to feel like the old me, the confident me on the court, bulletproof, aggressive, always smiling because I was doing what I simply love to do, play. The burning question going around in my head was always, should I have gone back and played at the lower level and probably dominate? In hindsight, to enjoy my basketball again? Probably, but I wasn't a quitter and these people weren't going to stop me playing, no matter what they threw at me. Has this helped me in business and life? Absolutely. There's nothing that you can throw at me that will ever come close to the punishment I put my mind and body through during this span. Training 4 hours a day, 6 days a week for 50 weeks a year, just makes you mentally stronger. But all the time knowing deep down that it probably wasn't going to be enough in the coach's eyes. But let's go back a bit. During primary school, the game became a sanctuary. I had some friends, but they had their interests, and I usually found them boring, whether it was another sport or just sitting around doing not much. I knew that there was more for me out in the world, and I was going to be different. I had no idea what this meant, but I knew from a very early age that I was destined for something more. I'd leave home early and get to school to shoot around, then every school break I'd typically play whenever I could. After school, I was either shooting around at home or at actual practice. If the sun was up, I was probably outside shooting around, playing games in my head. My poor neighbours. It was safe. School wasn't always the safest place when you played basketball in the late 70s. I was often referred to as the poofter, a gay slang reference, that played basketball. And quite often, my ball would get kicked away or the like. And sometimes this ended up in fights, just to try and stop the madness. My last year in primary school was probably the time that I had the most fights, just sticking up for myself. I'm not sure why. I was the captain of the school football and cricket teams, and I assume this carried some weight. But when it came to basketball, all bets were off. They came at me. It was in this transition period of finishing grade 6 and starting high school when I was forcefully told that I was on my own when it came to protection or guidance at high school from my siblings. It was then and there that I knew I was alone. A warrior, if you like. Me against the world. In hindsight, which I realised when I was about 52, this was a devastating moment for me. No one stood up for me around the family table. And upon reflection, it was at this very moment when I knew that not only was I different, I was alone on this new, daunting venture and pathway. I took the words literally. When the eventual fights came in my early high school years, I was still tiny and skinny, but was always on the basketball court. I easily became the target for the much larger kids and groups who walked the grounds at recess and lunchtimes. One of the harder things to deal with was when my so-called friends in my basketball group decided to join the cool kids when it came to picking on me. We'd literally go from playing a pickup game to me all of a sudden defending myself against others and my so-called basketball friends. One of these kids was someone I typically hung out with all the time away from school, and who was also on my basketball team, so that was fun. And there was the time when I didn't want to go to a school camp because I was afraid of being a target, and after being assured I wouldn't be, there were many times that I was, and it wasn't pleasant. There was no point in saying anything, it was done. So I'd get home, and if I wasn't in my room alone, protected, I was down the driveway shooting around. Both were my sanctuaries. Life became a series of protective actions on my behalf. In primary school, I was on full alert, and then this became to transfer into games and practices, when the coach would start to chew me out. I'd started to put up a super wall, let no one in, put on a happy face, but I wasn't going to quit. No way was I going to quit. I loved the game too much, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me play. I literally had nothing else. Nothing has ever interested me like my sport. Upon reflection back into those times, I now understand why I've acted, responded, and protected myself against many things. I've never allowed myself to get too close to coaches or my teammates. My trust was always somehow shattered, so it was just easy to put up the wall. I never wanted to fit in, because not only did I not understand exactly what that meant, I was trying to fit into what? But I couldn't relate to a lot of people. They were happy to settle for the status quo in many instances, and I never understood this. There's so much more to life than the usual preached ideals. Get a job, blah blah blah. I didn't like school for this reason, and I didn't like my first few jobs for this reason. Sure, I was contributing to a company, but I wasn't making a difference. At the age of 17, I left high school at the end of year 11. I couldn't see myself completing the last year of school and was rightfully advised by the school that I should look for a job. I did that, got one, and in March of 1982, I got retrenched due to the economy going through the floor. For the next couple of months, I didn't do very well. Couldn't get a job, was training with the senior basketball team but couldn't get minutes, and I was lost. Felt worthless and useless. No one would miss me. On May 22nd, yep, I remember the date like it was yesterday, I seriously considered suicide. It was going to be a swift knife into the middle of my chest, down at the bottom of my backyard at my parents' house. It was a cold, dull day, and it was just after lunch. The mind was ticking. I was actually thinking about which knife to use and whether I'd be brave enough to actually do it myself or dig the knife into the ground and dive on it. Decisions. And then I started to think about the aftermath of that event. What would happen then? Who would miss me? Who would be sad? And then I thought about my parents. Everything they'd done for me. They didn't deserve that. Going down the back and finding their youngest son lifeless. And it would have been bloody. I pictured my mum and dad's faces. I started to cry, and that was literally the only thing that stopped me. In 1999, I sadly literally saw what their faces would look like if they lost a child. When they lost their elder daughter, my big sister, Janet, in a tragic plane crash in Hawaii, while on her annual vacation. My parents were never the same, right up until their eventual passing. The "I'll do it on my own" mentality followed me right through until the age of 40. When the penny finally dropped after hearing many mentors on audio recordings and in books quote, "It's a team that has power. You can't do it alone." And you think I would have received this lesson from my team sport, right? Nope. I was ignoring that lesson and equating it to life, not my sport. And then there's the period on your 40s when you feel like you may have wasted many years of your life because you haven't achieved what you set out to do. Or you're comparing yourself to others, or considering yourself a failure. Or the simple fact you might be about halfway through your life and you think it might be all but over. When you fall into this spiral, there's not a lot that people can tell you. Sometimes you just want to get in your car and drive to nowhere in particular. Just get away and start again. Even if you have the most amazing family you could dream of or wish for, your thought processes aren't normal at this point in time. There's no reasoning, and it's not about them. It's definitely not fun and not pleasant to go through. But when you do come out the other side, whether it's through life lessons, personal development, a mentor, or just time, you wake up every single day with the simple thought processes of being grateful for everything. You woke up, you can see, you can hear, you have a bed. We'll address these throughout this course, but for now, know that many have gone through these same thought processes, experiences, and feelings. You are not alone. And if you're wondering just how ingrained these traumas were for me, even up to the age of 50, living in a completely different city, I still went to the gym and expected to see my gym card carrying some sort of graffiti or damage. I'd still wait for people to yell at me when I was in the basketball stadium, my sanctuary, for something that may have gone wrong. My fault. Yeah, I know, it's weird. Even as I recorded these memories, to be still holding on to them doesn't sound really smart. But until you actually sit down and bring these memories to the surface, and ask why they're still a major part of your thinking today, well, having gone through this now, it's going to be one of the lessons in this course. I know that this has been a very heavy introduction to myself and the course, but I wanted you to know that you're not alone on this journey and everyone has a story. You are loved. The lessons within this course have been written following my personal experiences, the 30 plus years of personal development I continue to be involved in, and from speaking to many who, like you and I, have a story. Have felt alone at one point or many, and wanted to share a lesson about something they'd experienced or done to get them through. Wherever you're watching or listening to these lessons, please take them as they're intended, a gift to a fellow human being. If they work for you, fantastic. If they don't, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It simply means that as one of the 7 billion members of the human race on this planet, you need a different message because you're simply different to me. You are loved, and as such, an amazing, incredible work of art that is on the journey that is the miracle of life. I can't wait to see what you do.